I had this whiplash of what I interpreted in my body as betrayal of as my husband, you're supposed to catch me. This rule of my head of you said you were going to take care of me in our vows. And so this feeling of betrayal was like this sound boom that hit me while I was already spinning with PTSD and trying to make sense of this.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Annie Emprima. How are you doing today, Annie?
I'm good. I'm good. How about
I'm
yourself?
doing absolutely amazing. I'm really excited to get into this conversation today.
Me too.
One of the ways I love kicking off the show is talking about the importance of networking. How are we connected?
We are connected through Facebook.
It really is. I love Facebook for that sense. I know there's those things about social media, and I understand where they come from. But one of the things I found throughout my podcasting journey, whether it was me launching my show or now me having more and more guests on, is how helpful that community is of just collaboration. And I think we all have those messages we're either trying to share or help people amplify. And I really do appreciate the groups like that.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can use technology to connect.
So I want to know a little bit more about you, that comic book issue origin story. Who's Annie?
Oh, um, so I deployed in 2016. That's pretty much the beginning of the story. Uh, if I were to be in a super hero movie, it would start with that. So 4 days into my deployment, I'm in the Middle East, and um, my senses just turned on. There was no memo, no warning order, no instruction manual, just starting to feel, see, and hear things, which didn't quite fit into a military deployment environment. Um, I joke that I was flying in and out of Iraq, so we're full battle rattle with our ammo and our bulletproof gear, and so I couldn't tell anybody that I was hearing voices. That these voices, what I now call whispers, refer to them as whispers, would guide me to help other people, but I didn't know it at the time. I just thought I was being really awkward and being a weirdo because I had no explanation to think anything else. So from that deployment came these whispers that would say things like, don't leave that person alone, or go walk with that person, or nope, you're not eating on this side of the chow hall today. We're going to move you, like these invisible big hands pushing me to eat on this side of the chow hall. And I just really thought I was being an incredibly awkward human trying to figure out what this was going on in my head and then how it was presenting out to the rest of the world. What I didn't realize is that those whispers have indeed helped me in really amazing ways, not just to help me understand my own mind body soul relationship, but to help other people start to hear their own whispers, whether it's the body saying we're overloaded, we can't handle anymore, or it's the soul saying this is not what we wish for you. We want you to be happier, safer, healthier. So in this deployment space, I'm dealing with physical injuries. I'm dealing with mental health injuries. I'm dealing with a spiritual. I call it a grand spiritual awakening because what it did was it cracked open what I believed to be true for reality. And so everything about what I thought I knew about the world and reality was cracking and shifting as I'm developing PTSD. My senses are also going up at the same speed. So there's a whole lot of swirling, and it after I got back from my deployment, there was nothing left in me. My battery had died, and then my internal battery, so it was like I collapsed on the floor. I tripped over my own feet because I had no more energy left in my body, mentally, physically, spiritually, to even get myself up off the floor. And that was in this sort of superhero archetype arc. this was the moment when I realized I had to embrace what I had. There was no choice, because if I wanted to get up off the floor, I had to make this sort of contract and agreement in my head of, I will let go of being a rescuer. I will let go of taking care of other people that were not feeding me back. I will let go of all of these things that were draining me so that I could flourish in my life. And it was, I don't want to undermine the amount of pain and trouble and struggle and um, difficulty that transition was, but it led me to this really incredible place to help people understand their traumas in a way that mental health and medical lanes are not able to see, because I have those whispers helping me understand how a person's system works. So that's the short story.
What called you to serve to begin with?
I don't, mm, I don't know because at different points in my military career, people had asked me the question, and my answer was always different. At first, it was, I remember 9/11 and feeling very helpless. I remember not not having any skills and feeling all I could do was feel the discomfort of being helpless, and I never wanted to feel helpless. So 7 years later, about 6 years later, I joined the military. But it was also, at the time, it was the National Guard. They were offering a bonus. My fiance at the time and I were struggling financially, and that was an opportunity to get ahead. We weren't behind per se, but we weren't ahead. And that was one of my answers throughout my career when someone would ask. But I think that when I look back, I, I don't know that the answer would have mattered, because I think I was supposed to be on that deployment. I was supposed to have this and I sort of knew it when I got on the bus. We left Las Vegas. We had the ceremony on January 2nd of 2016. We had the ceremony. We got on the bus to get to the airplane to go to Fort Hood for training, for primo training. And I knew in that moment something was happening on this deployment. There was something in the works, even if my mind never got the memo. I knew in that moment something was about to unfold.
It makes a lot of sense talking about your journey, and of course, I know as hindsight's always 2020 as well. Looking back at things, especially as you mentioned, you had quite an extensive military career. Now take me through once you get back from the deployment. You mentioned that you kind of just had to surrender, and what happened next for you?
Oh, everything crumbled. Look, I don't want to just, I don't want anyone listening to think, oh, this moment happened and then everything got great. No, no, no. I came back um, expecting my husband to catch me. I knew I was falling, and during the deployment, which many service members do, when I get home, I'll take care of it when I get home. And so I anchored safety and support to when I got home, except when I came home, my son was addicted to YouTube. He couldn't separate the device from him because that was his coping mechanism for a year. My husband was present, but he wasn't present. And so I'm falling, and he can't see that I'm falling. He's in his own reality, and I'm not in that reality. And so I had this whiplash of what I interpreted in my body as betrayal of, as my husband, you're supposed to catch me. This rule of my head of, you said you were going to take care of me in our vows. And so this feeling of betrayal was like this sound boom that hit me while I was already spinning with PTSD and trying to make sense of this. So I come home to a whole different tornado. And my business that I had started building before I deployed, started crumbling while I was deployed because I wasn't there. And when I came home, I had PTSD. I couldn't concentrate. I'm dealing with all of these emotions. So the business is just like crumbling in my hands. I can't catch it to hold it. My marriage is crumbling. My friendships are crumbling because they can't now relate to the woman that just came back from a deployment with PTSD. I'm no longer the friend that left. And my husband came back when I came home. It was like, "Oh, mom's back. My wife is back. The business owner that's going to have another income is back." And it was the expectation that I could get on the treadmill and run 7.5 miles an hour again. And that wasn't my reality at all. I came back limping with knee injuries and ankle injuries. And so he could not even see that I was falling. Every spoke on my wheel crumbled. And I could not, my hands could not grab anything to hold on to anything. So I couldn't even hold on to something like a guardrail of life, metaphorically. There was nothing for me to hold. I'm falling and everything around me is crumbling. And I'm trying to figure out what life looks like now because everything that was stable, that I thought was stable before, now does not exist. And so that was an incredibly painful period of time. But at the same time, these voices were still like, we got you, you're okay. This is the path you need to take. So this reassurance of this sort of subconscious voice in me and a feeling in my heart that this is the path I'm supposed to take, but what the environment in front of me was not matching that peacefulness. So it was not fun.
No, Annie, and I can completely imagine, as you mentioned, coming back from a deployment like that you have PTSD and you're struggling once you get home, because I think a lot of times, while I didn't serve, I've now talked to a good amount of service members, and a lot of that expectation is you kind of are just back to your regular self, or you're kind of back to what you were doing beforehand. And of course, those that didn't serve, especially in your immediate surroundings, maybe don't always understand how impactful that experience is, and that a lot of times I think we struggle, or especially those who come back struggle internally, whether of course maybe if you can see if it's physical ailments, but a lot of times that physical ailment doesn't show up as easily as, or excuse me, the mental ailments don't show up as easily as sometimes the physical ailments.
Yeah, and I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD at the time. I just knew I couldn't concentrate on an email, and someone would say something to me and I couldn't hold on to what they just said to be able to reiterate it. So in my mind, PTSD was this battlefield. It was obvious, the battlefield trauma, the obvious trauma, the disorientation and the behavioral and the the extrema on the spectrum. I had no idea what I was experiencing was PTSD because it wasn't so theatrical. It was just not so functioning. And that was hard for me because my pride was like, I got this. I'm fine. I'll figure it out. And then I fell on my knees and I couldn't get back up. So, like, this is the moment when we have to acknowledge something's wrong.
Take me through that journey of once you acknowledge something's wrong. What happened after that?
A short period later, I asked for a divorce. Um, and about 6 weeks after that, I went into surgery for my knees. So I'm packing. I chose to leave our brand new home. Like everything in my world just felt like it didn't fit me anymore. So I'm packing with crutches, dealing with what I processed as betrayal because the moment I asked for a divorce, less than 24 hours later, he was on a dating site with a 6-month membership to start filling the role again. He was going to interview. I resigned from my position and he's going to fill that position immediately. So that really hit me it was never about me. The marriage was never about me. It was never in love with me. It was the position I filled to meet someone else's needs. And that was a huge awakening of like a slap in the face of reality of the person that I had spent an entire year anchoring of when I get home, he's going to catch me. Not only didn't catch me, he's like, oh, well, since you're not going to do your job anymore, I'm going to go interview other women. So I was like, oh, it was a very, I think whiplash is the best way to explain it. And then, so I moved into I moved into a smaller home, and then for the next many years, I was dealing with spitefulness. So um, I wasn't working. I was struggling financially because I couldn't concentrate to hold my business together. And while I'm doing that, like I have no money to buy my son birthday gifts. And my ex-husband would then turn around and buy my son like $1,000 gift or a $500 gift to like show how much to show how much better of a parent he was. And so as I'm struggling, I'm also dealing with this heartbreak of nothing I do is going to be good enough. Again, I can't grab anything to say I'm I'm I have value in this moment. And so all of that just really just kept going for many years. It was stacking one thing over another without any reprieve, without any break to heal. And so I would like to say that at that moment in time is when I started healing, but that wasn't true either. It took a few years. And then when I started to come out of that space, then my closest friend in Las Vegas died unexpectedly at 57 years old. And that opened up another layer of life lessons to navigate through. So it was trauma after trauma, chronic, complex, kept going, multiple types of trauma. So it didn't really start to get better until the pandemic, until late in 2020, when I started coming online and having social media international access. And then my business started rolling, and I had enough lessons in parental alienation and relationship trauma um, and business trauma. In 2018, I had lent some money to some friends to support their business, and they ended up running out with that money, which set another level of betrayal. So it was like I had all of these lessons on friendship and relationships and business partnerships and um, relationships with my own body, and they were very painful lessons. But I think started to graduate in 2020,
Now,
2021.
you mentioned 2020, and I think one of the things is, of course, the pandemic was going on, and I
Yeah.
never like to shortcise how traumatizing that was for a large amount of people, but also I know how much people also grew during that time period because I think there's something about when you're forced to be with yourself almost all the time, it really unlocks a lot of who you are, what you really want, and whether you want to or not. Sometimes I remember I was in Atlanta and I was in a studio apartment, and that was a giant concrete wall that I spent a large amount of time. I'd sneak outside to go for runs and things like that, and as long as you stayed off the major trails, you were kind of left alone where I was. But I think it was one of those times for a lot of people to really reflect on who they were, what they wanted, and how to kind of unpack and move on to what was next.
Yeah, yeah, it, for so many people 2020 was a very painful period, but for me 2020 was the blooming. It was when my flower got to bloom. um, I had just started my business in 2019, right before my friend passed away, and then that sent me into lessons of the connection between grief and the body. So by the end of 2020, the pandemic money had sort of given me enough breathing room to spend a lot more time on social media instead of hustling in the traditional ways. And that there was an app called Clubhouse at the time, way back when. I mean, it's still there. Just it was booming in that year, and it gave me access to an international audience, and it really changed my life because right after that, I uh, started developing a presence on TikTok, and and without TikTok, I would not have the community that I have now. That was really this huge gift that came from all of my pain, was being able to tell my stories on TikTok and help other people, and that really catapulted my business in a grand way.
On everyone's journey, you make a decision not really knowing the outcome. Can you give me a time where you just went for it and how it turned out?
Yeah, I there was a defining moment with TikTok because at the time you had to have 1,000 followers to go live. And I had started May of 2020, 2021, May of 2021. And I had just gotten my 1,000 followers in December of 2020. It was a very slow roll. And it's Christmas night. My son is with his dad, and I'm cutting wrapping paper in my kitchen, wrapping the gifts because he's going to be coming the next day. And the whisper came in and said, "Stop what you're doing and go on TikTok." Like, I don't want to go on TikTok. I want to finish wrapping these presents. Stop what you're doing. Go on TikTok. So it was about 9 o'clock at night, Christmas night, 2021, and I go on TikTok, and I was open when I started the live. I don't know why I'm here. I just This whisper said I needed to be here, and I ended up being on a 3-hour live, and there were over 500 people in that live, and that made me realize how important it was for me to be there. And so I started going live with frequency from that point forward, and it really grew my business. But those whispers have come many times. That's just one example of a whisper coming to me. Um, it also The whispers also came during the pandemic, and when the pandemic first hit, the whisper said, "Don't worry about it. It's not in your path." And because I had no concern about contracting the virus, when I was in the supermarket, I was very calm and peaceful, and I started to pay attention to behavior under stress. And I had my phone and I was documenting the foods that were missing off the shelf, and I wanted to understand why certain foods were so desirable, but other foods like organic vegetables were not leaving the shelves. And I noticed the pattern that people were taking all of the childhood comfort foods, the chicken noodle soup, the peanut butter and jelly, the pastas, um, like the tacos, the hard shell tacos, and not so it wasn't just toilet paper. It was also the things that reminded people of the child, dinosaur chicken nuggets. Those were the first things going because people were going back to their childhood, seeking comfort. And I also watched people's behavior. Because I was calm, I noticed more people were watching me, and they weren't consciously aware of it. So there was one day I was in a tiny little supermarket, uh, like a neighborhood grocery, and I'm walking, and I have three people in shopping carts following me. Now I shop very erratic. It's a very erratic pattern. I don't follow any logical system. It's, oh, I want this for dinner. Okay, yeah, let's have chicken, and then I'm gonna go crossing the aisles to go get the pieces that I want. And I noticed that these three shopping carts were following me, which made zero sense. No one should be following me because there is zero logic to what I'm doing. And it wasn't until I stopped, turned around, and looked them in the eye, that they came out of this fog and realized they weren't even in an aisle that had food they wanted. So they all dispersed. And I thought that was such an odd realization of how, when we're under stress, we will seek the person that seems to be most uh, grounded in the moment. And that was a huge aha to me, and a big awakening. But I had, at some subconscious level, already knew that because I had established the first 47 days after when Las Vegas shut down, uh, 47 days straight from that point. A friend of mine, she and I showed up 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. every day on Zoom. And we advertised for free. It was free to attend. So at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Pacific, people could show up from anywhere in the world. And we were offering psychology tips like, let's do a little breathing meditation. Let's do a little bit of understanding on behavior under stress. And we did that for 47 days. So I had already knew that that was needed in the community before I ended up in the supermarket with this moment with the shopping carts. But that was a big uh, that was the start to me becoming a metaphysical trauma researcher. Of, let me pay attention to the things no one else is tracking.
Title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on now? Can you tell me a little bit more about your business and what you do?
Yeah, I have a book coming out shortly called Trauma Whispers Before It Roars. It helps people, it walks people in a very paced way to see trauma if they are not aware or understanding what trauma is. So I don't go through any of the traditional pieces. It's more of, let's take this book through your home and see if your home is reflecting your nervous system. Are you doing things that might highlight something's wrong, but you're not consciously aware of it? Are there like piles of laundry around the bed creating a moat because there's a lack of safety that is reflecting trauma from a period of time that may or may not have been healed? How do we talk to our dogs? How do we treat our dogs? Are we using our dogs as inner children? And are we trying to heal inner wounds through how we have a relationship with our pets? So it's things that we wouldn't normally look at. And I then take people through understanding how to build something useful with the stories that we have and the history that we came into this world with. So that's coming up. My research is looking at how different disorders and diseases are really stemming from trauma, which anyone in the medical field that's listening might think that's not possible. But I'm pushing the limits on what neuroscience understands about trauma and reversing things. And I'm not healing, I'm not a healer, but I help people clear the trauma that's causing the physical ailment. So when that stress is lifted from the body doesn't have to present and it doesn't have to roar. We can then go back to a whisper volume in helping people process the overload that the body is carrying. So my research is pushing limits on how we understand autoimmune disorders, how we understand things that we would have considered rare, irreversible, or genetic conditions. I break those boundaries, and that's what I want to do for the next 3-4 decades.
If people want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you online? As you mentioned, you're pretty heavy in social media.
Yeah, right now I'm heavy in LinkedIn. I will be returning back to TikTok, but I took a hiatus. I'm very heavy in LinkedIn right now because I'm working with mental health professionals, being that my book is coming out. So I'm on LinkedIn, but going to my website, following the newsletter, that's going to start ramping up a little bit more now that the book is coming out. Anyone searches my name, it's going to come to the same person. There's only one of me. There's only one Annie Emprima.
Well, Annie, I want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk soon. Another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.